I'm Liz Scuff and welcome to another little video in this collaborative learning for cultural repair exploration. This is number 5 of a series about inner criticism, inner critics, and it's the last one in this series because I'm done with this now. And there's so much to say and so many different ways of thinking about experiences that I'm calling inner criticism. So it's not the be all and end all. I think I feel done. In this video, there's 4 last things I want to share about inner criticism. And again, just to reiterate, inner criticism is partly how internalized oppression also happens. And so that's a huge part of why I think it's really relevant to cultural repair. And also because the first point I want to make is the reasons why critics are such a big problem for many people, and I've done my own sort of research with this, interviewing and asking people about it, is that critics stop us doing things that are really important to us, that matter to us. And so we worry that we won't do the things we're really passionate about or that have lots of meaning for us because we keep getting stopped by inner critics. And they make us do things that we don't actually really want to do, that are not a good fit for us. They guilt trip us, they criticize or push us around, make us feel small, or set us up to be excessively ambitious or to be unstrategic about how we achieve things. So that's the first thing I want to say. Critics stop us doing things that matter to us, and that's why, one of the big reasons why it's really important to work on them. And because they also stop us being our diverse selves, and that's hugely important to culture, I think, is that our own inner diversity, our own unique quirkiness and unique gifts have space to contribute and participate in the world, right? And critics stop us doing that because they support homogenization in their identity. Okay, that's the first point. Second thing to know, you already know it, right? But is that inner criticism escalates when we are taking risks or we are sort of at the edge of our own identity, or at the edge of our own sort of known world, right? There's things we know and accept about ourselves, but when we are growing and changing, and some of that growth and change sort of challenges that sense of this is who I am, critics get much louder here and more stressful. So it's a good thing to notice. Like if you're having like an extra critical time, it's probably because you're growing extra, sort of more than your day to day. Or that you've got a challenge that you're trying to grapple with that your critics are just freaking out, saying, no, don't do it, change is bad. Or why haven't you done it already? The third thing I want to mention is that when we are like growing and changing, I guess we're changing. I just think we're kind of trying to grow into ourselves more and more across our lifespan, right? But if we're doing that from a critical position, like I'm broken and I need to fix this thing about myself, or I shouldn't be like this, I should be more like that. If change or growth comes from a critical position, it's not nice, it's unpleasant, and it generally won't work anyway. And sometimes it's against our actual natural growth direction. Not always. We can really discern what our growth direction is and then be really critical at ourselves in terms of trying to get there. But it's just a very difficult way to change. And often what critics will do once, they've lost the fight for change, right, is that they might set us up into a big change regime, right? Like it's, okay, this is a classic one, I'm going to get healthy. I'm going to get up at 5 a.m. I'm going to have a kale smoothie. Then I'm going to do an hour of yoga, and then I'm going to meditate for blah, blah, blah. And then I'm going to, it's like this massive change regime. And it generally, I couldn't say this definitively. I've never seen it work. Every time I've done it to myself, it's never really worked. And a lot of the research, certainly, relative to Western psyches, of course, I can only really talk about Western psyches, is that it doesn't work as well. And I actually think it's a setup by critics to make us fail, to prove themselves right and to keep us actually stuck. It looks like it's an attempt at change, but I think it's a setup to actually not change. So I'm constantly coaching myself and suggesting to clients too, right, small steps actually are the way to change, and small steps in a kind atmosphere as well. So like whenever I'm trying to do a change thing, or sometimes, not always, like I might actually have a chart and I'll have a goal that, you know, I'll get this thing done like 80% of the time. That's my, you know, I don't need to do it perfectly. I just need to, you know, 80%, or maybe it's 70, or maybe it's 90. But, you know, like this idea that it doesn't need to be perfect. And I think for me, that just kind of is a kindness internally. There's lots of different ways to be kind internally, of course, but just noticing sometimes it's our critics setting us up for change, and it's our critics strategizing how we're going to do change. And generally they don't use effective strategies. So that's my third point, is generally there are strategies for change. Their motivations aren't helpful, their strategies aren't helpful. So finding you know, a more loving or more thoughtful, kind, or naturally emerging drive for growth and change, and then doing that in a kind, achievable, and actually slower way. It has to be slower. That's partly why we get frustrated with it, right? We want a big change real quick, but slow steps, and that require us to grow discipline. And of course, that's not what critics actually advocate for either, right? Really, not in their strategies. So learning discipline and self-governance, and I talked about this in as a growing up process in the second video in the series about what is cultural repair. I'm pretty sure it's the second one. And I will make another video about that again. I just think self-governance is a huge, and growing up is a really huge part of cultural repair work in terms of our inner work. So yeah, big regime changes don't work in our own life. Small steps and self-acknowledgement when we are successful. That's also why I like small steps. Inner critics don't celebrate success, right? When you succeed with something that an inner critic has set you up to do, it just is like it ignores the success and just immediately goes on to the next thing you haven't done right. So another thing with change is make them small steps, make them achievable, easy wins, set the bar low for success, and then pause and take a moment to succeed and say, yay, I did that thing today, good for me. You don't have to stay there for a long time, but just the inner recognition of, yeah, I turned up, I had a go, good on me. I did that thing. And then keep moving. That kind of thing actually sets up more motivation for growth and change and effort than criticism. Now, the last thing I wanted to say is just a couple of tips of things that I think can be really helpful for growing for transforming inner critics into really good internal coaches and sort of supporters and cheerleaders and critical thinkers and critical strategists, right? Is two resources. The first one, it's called selfcompassion.org or selfcompassion.com. I never remember this, but the self-compassion is hyphenated. And Kristen Neff is, this is her website, and she's a psychologist who has transformed, let's say, Eastern Buddhist tools or technical. They just have some really brilliant work around self-compassion, and so she's done some modifications to that to make it more usable for people with Western psychology. And her whole website's just got great videos, great little 3-step process about how to do self-compassion internally. She's got lots of really great resources with activities to do to sort of build that. And I actually think this is a strategy we can use to transform our inner critics, to teach them the skill of compassion, and to transform them into more sort of just really compassionate companions in change processes, right? The other thing that I've found really cool in the past few years is the TV series Ted Lasso. Now, you have to pay for it, it's not free. And I haven't finished it, but Ted Lasso is he's a sports coach who from the US. This is in the story, in the US, who is imported over to coach a British. Is it a soccer team? Oh my God, it's a soccer team. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, he doesn't know anything about soccer, but he is like a relentlessly positive coach. And that's why I think he's a really, really cool thing to watch. If you're trying to work on how to transform, how to be a really compassionate, loving, positively motivating kind of internal coach, it's like, where do we see that modeled in our culture, right? Where do we see that? We don't see it in too many places, but I think Ted Lasso is this great model for like a very, very positive, optimistic, determined, disciplined kind of coach who's just, and when I say disciplined, like really committed, he really shows up. And I just think he's a really great role model. And the psyche, when we're trying to change, we need role models. We need to see a pattern of what does this look like? I don't know how to do this, and so that can be really helpful. So I just really wanted to recommend Ted Lasso, and I also just found it hysterical and fabulous. I loved the series. I didn't finish it because I've never finished a TV series except for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I think. Like even ones I just totally love, I never finish. Yeah, okay, that's the last video about inner criticism. I hope you found the series useful. Feel very free to stick any comments or questions in the comment section below. Yes, and I will be back not next week but the week after with something else. Okay, take care, bye.